History's strange, it's alien, and it won't give us what we would like to have.
Renewal by Anderson bringing you hour 3 of a Tuesday morning, and that means it's time for Dave Bowman. And Dave does history in this hour. Headline at BillMick.com, Trump Vision, and on that post you will find a link to all of Dave Bowman's work, and it'll take you to DaveBowmanShow.com, and you can link to everything he does from that page. So links for you there if you want to catch up with Dave and see what's going on. Dave, we spent a lot of time talking about the crafting of the Declaration of Independence. Now we're going to take a look at it, at its structure and what it's doing and how it's done it. And I don't know. I don't know if you can characterize this as anything other than brilliant in how it was put together.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And of course, this has been the goal all along to get to this point. And it's taken us 12, 13 weeks to get to that point where we actually have the document in our hands, what went into it, what happened. But now we're here. And I want you to take your metaphorical copy of the Declaration of Independence, or your real one if you haven't, kind of hold it in your hands for a moment. But I don't want you to think of it as a dusty piece of parchment behind a glass of the National Archives in Washington, D.C., guarded by the National Guard right now. I want you to think of that document as a building itself. It's a structure of ideas, of arguments. It's designed to last. Every stone was placed with precision. Every arch supports the next. It's not just a random pile of words. It's a deliberate design built to carry the weight of a new nation. Now, on the surface of it, it seems like it's just a statement to the world that the 13 colonies are, breaking away from Britain. But if you look closer, you're going to see a framework built from the best materials the founders could find. Stone from Greece and Rome, shaped by civic virtue and the art of persuasion. Fresh timber from the Enlightenment philosophies, cut from the idea of natural rights and consent of the government. Solid floors from the British Constitution, grounded in the Magna Carta and the Bill of Rights. And we've got reinforcing steel girders from colonial experience, forged in the belief that liberty is fragile and power always needs to be checked. Jefferson and his colleagues did not simply borrow these elements, they fit them together in a way that no one had ever done before. The preamble serves as a grand entrance, welcoming all with universal principles. The statement of purpose explains the break. The long gallery of grievances supports the argument with evidence, and the conclusion will seal the structure with the Pledge of Independence and mutual honor. Nothing in this document is accidental. Language, sequence, logic, emotion all work together like keystone and arch. And the result is a structure that can withstand war, change, and centuries of debate. Today we start our walk through this building together, and we'll see why the Declaration of Independence remains the blueprint of liberty.
And we pick it up in 1 minute on 92.7 FM WMMB. So, Dave, let's start breaking this building down because it was so well crafted and with purpose and intent, as you have mentioned. It's a wonder to behold.
We have to start a long time ago. One of the things that I will tell you, if you ever sit in my lectures, classes, whatever, is that if you do not have a classical understanding of Roman and Greek history, you're not going to have the foundation that you need to have to understand how this came to be. The stories that today historians will try to tell you are mythology, the Roman myth, whatever, the founders didn't see it that way. They saw this as Roman history. They understood Roman civic virtue. They understood the Republic of Rome in ways that we don't even think about. I mean, it's the ongoing meme about how many times a day does the average American man think about the Roman Empire? Well, it's a lot, but we should be thinking about the Roman Republic, which for 500 years was the most powerful republic in history. Was it perfect? No. No republic ever is. But it is the model. It's full of civic virtue. It's full of Cicero's oratory, which is an interesting subject for this week. It's full of Republican ideals as models. And so we have to understand those things. So over the next few weeks, we'll be delving into some Roman history. It's full of Enlightenment thought, John Locke's natural rights, his social contract, his ideas about the consent of the governed. Now, while these were common ideas and understand, it was almost required reading for members of Congress and members of the leadership of the United States, not everybody understood those ideals from Locke. They understood them innately, and it was a very American ideology that Locke had managed to stumble on. There's a British constitutional tradition. We've talked about this before, the ancient rights of Englishmen. This is something that we've talked about at great extent with the taxes and the likes of that, this idea that since the time of the Magna Carta in 1215, which basically said that the king was bound by laws. This is one of the problems that King George had with the idea of the patriot king. He is bound by the law. He cannot violate those things. And so the colonials asking him to do that is going to be a problematic. He's not going to be able to do that. Well, that goes back to the Magna Carta in 1215, which bound the king to the law. There's an English Bill of Rights that comes along in 1689. It strengthens Parliament. It makes Parliament supreme. Much as later on, in 1787, we will write a document that will make Congress supreme, as opposed to the president. These are ideas that are coming from here, and these are ideas that are in play here. These charters that the colonies had all promised them the rights of Englishmen, even on this side of the Atlantic. All the colonial charters that were issued by the king and by Parliament said, okay, go to the New World, but you're still Englishmen. You still have these rights. You still have these ideas. And so coming here, we still had this belief that, hey, we have these rights, we have these privileges, we have these responsibilities. And part of the problem, of course, as we've talked about in the preceding 12 weeks, is that we didn't feel like we were getting those, we didn't feel like we were getting that treatment. We felt like we were getting kind of the short shrift of things. Lastly, there's this idea that is very American in its application. There's a historian by the name of Bernard Bailyn who describes it very well. This idea that Americans came to believe that liberty, and we talked about this all the way back at the beginning, self-determination, liberty, is very fragile, and that power will corrupt things. And once power corrupts, liberty is in danger. It is the first thing that goes. We could spend hours talking about Washington, D.C., and bring that into that. When the colonials read writers like Trenchard and Gordon, who warned that government power is always trying to expand and must be continually checked, we saw each new tax, each override of colonial assemblies. It wasn't just bad policy, it was another brick in the wall of tyranny. And that's why the Declaration of Independence doesn't just list complaints. It paints them as part of a deliberate plan to establish an absolute despotism over this land, over these colonies. And once you understand that, once you see that position, once you understand what we're driving at, you can only come to one conclusion, which is that we have to break free. I want to break free. And we have to do that before it's too late, because the longer we wait, the more this absolute despotism that's established over us, well, as they will say, the idea becomes that as long as evil is sufferable, we'll suffer it. And as you become more and more used to it, you're going to put up with it. So when Jefferson puts his pen to paper, he's not just starting from scratch. As I said, he's pulling stone from Rome, he's pulling from the Enlightenment, he's pulling from the British Constitution, and he's pulling from our experience as colonies. And he's setting them together into a foundation that is going to hold up a new nation. And that foundation is going to last us, well, so far, 250 years. Question is, how much longer can it last? And once we understand what's in it, hopefully we'll see that, like Rome, those virtues can last forever.
We certainly hope that's the case, and I appreciate the opportunity to explore it. Glad you're along with us for this Tuesday edition of Bill Mick Live. You can follow us on Instagram at WMMB Radio.
It's a take on history you won't find anywhere else. Dave Does History on Bill Mick Live.
Okay, well, you might find him on the link that I gave you at our show page today, Trump Vision. On that page, you got a link to Dave Bowman and everything he does, and he's with us every Tuesday bringing us Dave Does History. And Dave, getting ready to break down this amazing document. Where are we going next?
Sorry, you're going to hear my pod is dying, so for the next 10 or 15 seconds, that's going to go off. Listen, if the influences what we just talked about in the last segment are the foundation, then the structure of the Declaration is its framework. And Jefferson, he doesn't just spill words out onto a page. This isn't just, a press conference from a politician in Washington. It's built like a legal brief, like a speech that's meant to be heard, like a piece of architecture meant to stand for centuries. It's going to come to us in essentially 4 parts. And unfortunately, William, we're not going to have time to go into all 27 of the grievances today. We will, but it's going to take us some time to kind of get ourselves to that point before we start going through them. Part 1 is the preamble. This is a soaring front entrance to the document. You know it. In Congress, July 4th, 1776, the unanimous declaration. It declares here that all men are created equal and that they have unalienable rights that are given to them not by government, but by their creator. These are ideas that, again, they're not new ideas, but to be stated like this is unheard of. It says that then the governments are instituted to protect those rights, and that when those governments fail, the people have a right and even a duty to alter or abolish them. And then this is where Jefferson will channel some Enlightenment philosophy and take it a little bit further. The Greeks and the Romans never would have recognized the idea of equality as Jefferson had put it. That was something newly being stated. I mean, it was something that we understood, but the Romans and Greeks would have never seen it that way. And that's one of the things about the Declaration of Independence I think is important to keep in mind. It's an ideal. It is a stretch goal. It is something we're reaching for. We knew we weren't there then, and we know in some ways we're not there now. But we continue to, as the next document would say, continue to make a more perfect union. It takes time. The second part is the statement of purpose. This is the explanation for why the document even exists. Jefferson writes that out of respect for the opinions of mankind, the colonists will now state their reasons for separating. Yeah, we're going to tell you why we're doing it. It's diplomacy on paper. It's a signal that the new nation is not just rebelling. We're not just, trying to, we don't like this and so we're leaving. We are making a reasoned, thoughtful case to the entirety of the world. Again, something that hasn't necessarily happened before, and really ever again, although there have been some attempts to. But nothing like this point, up to this point, has ever happened. And that's what makes this document in many ways so unique.
So, Dave, it's being crafted very intentionally. And is that for the attention of the king and the parliament, or is that for the attention of the rest of the world?
I think it's for the world. It's going to get the king's attention. It's going to get parliament's attention, but I think it's really for the world. So we've got part 1, which is, of course, the preambles. Part 2 is the statement of purpose. Then we get to part 3, which is William's favorite part, and the longest part. This is the grievances. 27 specific things that we are going to accuse King George III of. Now, keep in mind, remember that there are other things we wanted to have in the document that got axed out, particularly with regards to slavery and our complaints, odd to our ears that they may be, about the Scottish. I can't even explain it to you why colonials hated the Scots so much, but as a general rule, most of society didn't see the Scottish in a very positive light. And we actually put that in the original draft that got yanked along with slavery. These bill of particulars against George III is not a random list. We start with legislative obstruction. We're going to move through how the king has interfered, and you'll notice that it's the king. We're not blaming Parliament anymore. Now we're blaming the king. His interference with justice, it then ends with an accusation that the king himself is waging war against the colonies, the very people that are supposed to be his beloved people. The rhythm is going to build. It's going to escalate. The charges, get worse and worse. And each line tightens up the case against the king. Jefferson uses repetition, so the points start to echo in the reader's mind. It's brilliant writing. As Adams would say, he can write 10 times better than I can. Then we get to the conclusion. The conclusion is the actual act of cutting the cord. This is where the colonies are, we're done. The colonies are now free and independent states with full powers to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, and, oh, by the way, conduct trade, which we're already doing, but, now we're saying we can. It is a declaration of sovereignty and, I think in many ways, importantly, a pledge that we will defend it. The 56 men who will sign this will commit their lives, their fortune, their sacred honor to that cause. And that invokes an echo of an ancient oath of loyalty to the republic that the Romans instituted back in 509 BCE when they took what was then known as the Oath of Brutus to defend the republic against any man who tried to set himself up as king. They had a requirement. They were required to kill that man. You don't tolerate a king. And most of Roman Republican history is that tension of that oath to maintain that. Through it all, Jefferson will balance logic, moral authority, emotional appeal, and he'll move from principle to action in a way that feels invisible by the time you reach that last sentence. You don't even notice it. It's classical rhetoric adapted for the modern audience, and it's built to persuade your heart and your head. It's more than just words on a paper. It's a design. And with the grand entrance of the preamble, it moves through the supporting hall of the purposes and grievances, and it ends in that strong final chamber of independence. And like any great design, there's stories behind that creation.
We continue and pick those up as we get the opportunity. In our next segment, we will invite you in, 321-768-1240, or with the Talkback feature on the iHeartRadio app, as we continue looking at the structure of the Declaration of Independence.
Call Bill now, 321-768-1240.
Renewal by Anderson, bringing you this hour. Dave Does History on Bill Mick Live. Our Liberty 250 series continues as we are taking a look at the structure of the Declaration of Independence. Dave, where are we going now?
So a good building has to survive storms. It has to do more than just look impressive. It has to last. It has to stand up. The Declaration of Independence was not just built for July of 1776. The structure that Jefferson came up with was designed to endure storms, both political and cultural, and for generations to come. The genius of the Declaration is in how it fits together, how those four parts work together. The principles in the preamble justify the grievances. The grievances justify independence. It mirrors legal reasoning. It makes the claim. It offers the evidence. It renders the judgment, and it states the remedy. This approach will appeal to reason, morality, and emotion all at once. And it's why it has remained so persuasive for so long. Its legacy is influence on documents far beyond America. In a few years hence, the French Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, the abolitionist manifestos of the 1830s through the 1860s, the women's rights conventions later on, and even into the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s, they all borrow from the form and cadence of the Declaration of Independence, as well as its promise and its intent. The careful arrangement of ideas, arguments, will become a model for movements that seek to claim their own liberty. And in fact, in 1945, Ho Chi Minh will virtually copy the American Declaration of Independence when he issues the Declaration of Independence from Japan of Vietnam. You have to wonder, what if we'd have paid more attention to that then, instead of just kind of blowing it off? This is where America's unwritten constitution will begin to grow. This idea that we have these certain understandings of things. The Declaration will plant principles that are not spelled out in law, but they live in our national conscience. Ideas like equality and right to pursue happiness have been debated. They've been expanded, redefined, but they continue to act as the standard by which we measure ourselves in each generation. We know that we're not always going to reach those benchmarks, but we have this guide, we have this ideal that we continue to strive for, that we continue to move towards. And that's what Jefferson has given us with this incredible structure, this incredibly written document. Now, it's important to remember that there are structural contradictions here. Slavery is going to persist. We all know that. We all understand that. We also understand the strange dichotomy of a Virginia writing that all men are created equal while owning slavery. But again, we're talking about ideals here. And I think, based on what he said at the time and what was discussed with him and Franklin and Adams, I don't necessarily think that Jefferson liked slavery. He understood its moral problems, but he didn't have a solution to it, and neither did anyone else. And in fact, the American solution to it would probably be the only one that actually ended slavery completely, cleanly, and ultimately. Even the British, who would outlaw slavery in 1833, wouldn't really outlaw it until 1937. The women, of course, are excluded from political life. Now, we see that as a contradiction, but understand that culture was much different in 1776, and that women, while not necessarily being politically involved, were politically involved. I love the line in the movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, about, the man is the head of the house, but the woman, she's the neck. And I think we see very clearly from the relationships of Dolly Madison and Abigail Adams that women were very involved with this stuff and very influential. Indigenous peoples, of course, were created as obstacles to expansion. For me personally, this is a huge issue. I have issues with that. But again, these are ideals. And the gaps between the ideals and reality, those have been the fault lines where later generations have had to push for change. But we can push for that change because we have this architecture in the Declaration that allows those challenges to be made within the framework that it will establish. And when combined with the Constitution, we have a way to proceed forward without necessarily descending into which has happened so many times in history: chaos, confusion, and indeed death. The Declaration of Independence is a political masterpiece because of what it says and because of how it is built. It draws upon the wisdom of the past, it speaks to the present, and it leaves room for the future. It leaves room to reshape and expand its own meaning. Its walls have been tested, its root has held, and its foundation is still strong enough to inspire those today who believe in liberty. We've looked at the foundation, we've looked at the structure, we've looked at the enduring strength. Over the next few weeks, months, year, we're going to open up the door and we're going to really delve into what it says, what it means, the actual verbiage, why it says that way, where the ideas came from, as we explore what we're going to call this blueprint of liberty and what it means today.
We'll continue to our conclusion in just 60 seconds here on WMMB. 321-768-1240 if you've got thoughts on today's Dave Does History. Dave, I think the key thing that you've hit on here is that this is about ideals and not perfection. We had not attained this, and many would argue we have not attained it today. That doesn't mean you don't hold the ideals up there and strive to reach them, and I think that's the hope that's written in this document.
I think that's one of the things that frustrates me most about modern life in America is that we take the approach of, well, the Union isn't perfect, and we don't necessarily act like all men are created equal, so therefore all of this stuff is invalid, as opposed to seeing it as a goal to work towards within the frameworks that we have. I cannot tell you how many times I've gotten that comment from listeners, emailers, texters. You know, if I'd have been there in 1787, 1775, it would have been different. Well, no, it wouldn't have been, because you're not as smart as Thomas Jefferson or Ben Franklin or John Adams, and they didn't know how to solve these things. But they knew what they were trying to achieve, and they knew that the way to do that was going to be to preserve liberty and to limit the ability of a government to become despotic. And by doing those two things, they would leave room for the appropriate changes and growth that they needed in other places. It's remarkable to me, particularly, I spent a lot of time doing Constitution Thursday, and I kind of see this as a Constitution Thursday for the Declaration. The same ideals are going to enter in 1787. We're just going to restructure them a little bit into an actual form of government. We tried it with the Articles of Confederation, but it didn't work because of some technical issues that we had. But the ideals are the same. The ideals are we have to preserve liberty, the idea of self-determination, and we have to prevent government from becoming despotic, abusive, and tyrannical. And if we can do those two things, there is literally nothing that we cannot accomplish.
As you evaluate this and take a look, what do you feel that Jefferson drew on primarily as he wrote this? Or was it an equal balance from classical Enlightenment things or the British Constitution? I can see that British Constitution saying, well, there's a structure that we can look at. But what was the major influence in your mind?
It's really all three. I mean, you have the British Constitution, the British Bill of Rights, the Magna Carta, these ideas of preventing tyranny, preventing despotism, combined with the Enlightenment ideals that they had were relatively new. The Enlightenment was not something that was ancient. This was a between Montesquieu and Locke and others, this was a reinterpretation of ideas. And if you really want to get into that, you should read Durant's Rousseau and Revolution. It's a long book, but it'll talk to you about how radical this idea of liberty really is. For me personally, it's that Roman element, particularly the Roman Republic. And again, I go back to how many times the founders and even the framers are going to draw from that Roman Republic. Remember that Washington, this stuff is so ingrained in them that when the army at Valley Forge is struggling, he puts on the play about Cato and the Roman Republic and how Cato saved the Republic. This is so ingrained in them that it's second nature. It's second nature history to them. It's automatic. And it's history that we don't have today. We lament all the time, well, they don't teach Latin in schools anymore. That's not the problem. The problem is we don't teach Roman history anymore. And because we don't know that Roman history, we don't understand the structure of our own government, our own ideals, and our own aims.
That's interesting. Hopefully, as we continue to approach this 250th anniversary of this country, we'll see a renewed appreciation for that. I've got listeners, I've got friends who are doing podcasts relating to this, in addition to you and me, that we are seeing some focus there. And as that fervor, and I think we will see further going into next July 4th, that this is going to be an exciting time. I just hope it's not all pageantry and that there's some seriousness that comes into it.
Yeah, because I was there for the bicentennial, and I don't remember any study of any depth. I remember celebration, but not necessarily education. And if we go back to the 4 reasons why we study history, those are 2 of the reasons. We didn't really get that education so much, other than Schoolhouse Rock. But that was
which, looking back on it, was amazing. By the way,
it was.
They did a great job. So as we look ahead, where are we going next week as we get this thing picked up?
I haven't quite figured it out yet. I sent you the breakdown, and I don't have it in front of me right at the moment. But we're going to start breaking down this document. We're going to start going through this document, seeing where it is there, and what's the preamble, I guess, is where we're going to go. How we get there, I haven't quite worked out yet, but we're going to talk about that opening statement.
We'll get there. Dave puts a lot of work into this. We appreciate it, Dave. Thank you so much. Renewal by Anderson brought you the hour. And Dave Bowman, we'll look forward to talking to you next Tuesday here on Bill Mick Live.
We'll see you then.
Check out more stories from history at davedoeshistory.org.